So I felt frustrated when I was speaking to the line producer who told me that I shouldn't work on queer movies. And I'm a stubborn person and I really doubled down on that. I just I think because I came out later, there's always this sense of shame. And like, it's very hard to shake that even when you're so out and you're engaged with the community. But sometimes there's that little feeling that you just can't shake. So that upset me when that line producer said that. And I realized that I don't agree with her sentiment and I really, really want to make the kind of movies that I wish I'd seen growing up.
Yo, what's going on, frequent flyers? How y'all doing today? Look at this, look at this beautiful man over here. I got my co-pilot, Jayden Choi. Look at him, looking real cozy on another episode of Board and Pass. Check you out, man. How you living today?
Hell yeah. What's up? I mean, I love the sweater weather. It's my kind of thing.
Now, if you're asking yourself who is this voice that's talking to you right now, or who you see on the lovely screen, I am Denzel Whitaker. I will be your pilot for today's flight. Welcome to the Inspo Lounge. We are chilling. We are kicking back. Jane, let's tell our frequent flyers who we're inviting to the stage today.
Alrighty. I mean, we have another very exciting guest today, and I'm very excited to, introduce today's guest, starting with her name, Rebs Fisher-Jackson, her nationality, UK, she's British, and her occupation, she's a writer, director, and a script supervisor. And fun fact, she occasionally can be mistaken for her favorite movie hero, Luke Skywalker.
All right. Well, without further ado, we're not even going to waste our times. Yo,
No.
Rebs, come on down to the Inspo Lounge. You need to explain your Luke Skywalker self over here.
Hey everyone.
Woo!
What's up? Welcome, welcome, welcome. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Explain this Luke Skywalker situation. What's up with that?
Okay, so you may have seen at some various events around LA or around the world, really, groups of like Star Wars costumers just like appearing, right? And we're all part of this group called the Rebel Legion and the 501st. We have bases around practically every country, and we dress up in screen accurate Star Wars costumes that we make ourselves and raise money for charity. So I was the Luke Skywalker at this year's Star Wars night at Dodger Stadium.
Wow.
At a Dodger Stadium.
At Dodger Stadium, yeah.
All right.
That's
But without further ado, let's jump right in. Now, Rebs and I have known each other for a while through IYMS. Audience, you should be familiar at this point, and if you're not, it's the International Youth Media Summit. What a wonderful nonprofit organization that brings youth from all over the world together to make projects for change. And Rebs, you have been a part of that summit. What year was that? Was that 2022? Yes?
2023.
Fantastic. And that was, if you don't mind, because I've actually seen the project, it's called Bystanders, correct? Do you mind giving a short, just brief explanation of what that project's about?
Absolutely. So we were in the discrimination group. We all had very different experiences of discrimination and didn't really want to just pick one because that's just not authentically reflecting our lived experiences, right? So we decided to make a film that included all of them that we'd personally experienced and just instead of focusing on the issue just by itself, focused on how we can encourage people to use their voices to stand up when they see different instances of discrimination.
Okay. Okay. Now, what do you feel like was your biggest contribution in terms that you put forth when considering different forms of discrimination?
I was talking about the homophobic just experiences of life and also ableism as well. I played a role in the film where I was on crutches, and that was based off of something that had happened to me 6 months before when I'd been trying to get to work on set and physically couldn't get onto set because I was on crutches. And the world was literally closed off for me. And that's a very temporary thing that I was experiencing in terms of like physical mobility in that way. But it was very awful. It was just awful trying to navigate wanting to go to work and not even being able to open the door to go. So that's something that I brought to attention. And I was also talking about how deep the issues of classism run as well. So kind of an intersectional approach.
All of those layers are very much resonant within the film Bystanders. I've happened to watch it a few times now. It's a phenomenal short film. Again, it's a part of the collection of IYMS just making films for great change. And I thought that the story that you guys were able to weave in such a short amount of time was really powerful and potent. Specifically without words, it was very much a visual film in and of itself. Let's rewind for a second. Tell us kind of like what sparked your journey of filmmaking? Like, where did the inspiration come from? Where all of a sudden did you get the passion and inspiration to start making films for change that were reflectant of yourself? Can you walk us through that journey?
I feel like there's two parts. There's the filmmaker journey, and then there's the reflective journey of wanting to show like my lived experiences and other people's lived experiences on screen. I can't really remember a time when I wasn't like obsessed with film and TV. I was obsessed with Doctor Who. I asked my mom to buy me like the collected scripts. Must have been like seven or eight, and I would just read them in this like it was like this big, this massive giant book, and I was just poring over those. And then I technically made my first film when I was about seven on a camcorder, and it was like this weird adaptation of The Snow Queen, where for some reason Baloo from the Jungle Book turned
Mhm.
up. Uh, so
How?
yeah, what a crossover, right?
Yeah.
So I have always been writing and making things, but then when I went to university and I watched like my first ever queer movie, which was Carol, it had such an impact on me that it I saw myself reflected on screen for the first time in a very positive way. Like before that, queer media had just been relegated to like negative or cliche stereotypes in soaps, and like more power to the soaps in the UK that they did show these storylines, but they weren't always the most positive depictions of like queer life. This movie, which isn't always an easy story, really resonated with me. And I came out like a week later to my friends because it was something I hadn't been able to explore before. And that movie kind of told me it was okay. Like, if these ladies, like, although it's fictional, these ladies are living their truths in 1952. What the hell is stopping me now? Um, so then I kind of realized that I wanted to marry my love of filmmaking with this like LGBTQ plus activism as well. Then
That's incredible. What age was it that you watched that film?
I just turned 20, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, fascinating. And prior to that, like you said, an impactful film per se for you that accurately showed representation or felt like your lived experience, correct?
Correct, yeah. I feel like most of the stuff I watched growing up was either very negative or almost exclusively gay men. But I never really saw like lesbians or bisexual women on screen. Doctor Who was great for the depiction of like Captain Jack Harkness, but still I wanted to watch something grounded in reality basically as well.
Interesting. Talk about that for a second in terms of like just queer depictions and also like representation of maybe lesbians or transgender or different preferences of queer, right? Do you feel like there are more representation today? Do you feel like you're finding that there's at least a diverse pool at this point, or is it still kind of like gay men might be leading the charge in terms of like what's being depicted?
I feel like it got better and now it's getting worse, like in the last year or so. But I feel like it's gotten more progressive across the board, not just for lesbians. I do feel like part of it is because in the UK at least, being a lesbian has never been a criminal offence ever. I think it was the same in the States as well, but it was criminalized to be a gay man. So I feel like there's a different nuance on when one has literally been a criminal offence and people have gone to prison for that. There is more need for immediate representation in that way back then in the UK, and I feel like that's kind of just stayed that way. And sometimes I feel like it plays into the idea that lesbianism isn't a legitimate thing, right? Like the times when someone says, "Oh, you've just not met the right man." But I don't necessarily think people say that to gay men from like my experience with my friends. "Oh, you haven't found the right woman," that kind of thing. So I kind of think that there was more of an immediate need for representation for gay men on screen with that in mind. And then I think it became popularized, maybe not in the best way of having like the gay friend on TV, that kind of thing, more so than the lesbian friend. Then it became such a stereotype in like comedies and that kind of thing. Now I feel like we were in a golden age of stuff like The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor, where we you had like mainstream shows that just happened to also be about lesbian characters or bisexual characters. But then I feel like there's been a steady decline in the last year or so.
Mm. Now that you mentioned Rebs, it is actually true that if you think about it, there are a lot of gay best friend characters in mainstream media, but I can't really think of a specific lesbian best friend character, and that's very true. You said you started with watching a movie that was talking about, that, and was that the reason why you started with film specific, or did you already have passion in film?
I think I already had a passion for film. I already knew that I was interested in writing. Um, didn't know I was interested in directing so much at that point. That came later. But I had an interest in writing that just kind of I realized that maybe if I'd seen more accurate representation across the board when I was growing up, maybe I wouldn't have come out at 20. Maybe I would have come out at 15, or maybe I wouldn't have had to have come out at all. And that bothered me. And I had conversations with people about working on queer projects, and people were like, "Well, if you work on that, that's all you're ever going to work on." Okay, so what? Maybe I want to work on like experience I resonate with, right?
Yeah.
So I just started writing my own stuff very early on after that.
Yeah, yeah, as you have to, because oh man, listen, we've talked about this plenty of times. It's like, oh, well, if you only work on the black films, that's all you're gonna work on, right? It's like, all right, cool, but at least I'm starting to write the thing that I actually would like to see for myself and my culture or my representation, which is wild.
Writing is the thing I have always done. I was an only child and spent my days writing when my parents were at work, right? It's something I've always been good at. I've been told I've been good at that. And it's just something that I've always just really enjoyed doing, like creating characters and that kind of thing. And then I just started to think about, okay, well, I need to find a director that I really trust to work with to bring my script to life. But then I grew up with a camera in my hands, like a photography camera, and I enjoyed framing shots and playing around with focus. And my very first short film, which was like a unfunded, no budget thing, it was during the COVID firebreak lockdown in Wales, and it was just me and my wife really for the majority of the shoot, and I had to direct it. And I enjoyed it, and I liked playing with that was Cariad, which was just a 2 minute low budget. I acted in it, so did my wife. I dragged her in. It was a very much an in-house family production, but I really enjoyed the directing aspects of just visualizing it because I'm a very visual writer. Like I see everything in my head.
Absolutely. Now, really quickly, I just want to brag on you for a second because you have 6 short films under your belt. Is that correct? You won 12 international awards, including Best Experimental Filmmaker of that year of 2022. Congratulations. You were also named Next Generation of LGBTQ plus filmmakers in Wales by the Iris Prize Pink Portraits Revisited Project, correct? That's a title. Jesus. Incredible stats, though. I mean, so well accomplished. What an esteemed honor to be given that title, that award. Can you kind of walk us through that process and just kind of tell us, like, how has that further influenced the type of films that you want to make?
So I felt frustrated when I was speaking to the line producer who told me that I shouldn't work on queer movies, right? And I'm a stubborn person and I really double down on that. And I just kind of, I think because I came out later, there's always this sense of shame and like it's very hard to shake that even when you're so out and you're engaged with the community, but sometimes there's that little feeling that you just can't shake. So that upset me when that line producer said that. And I realized that I don't agree with her sentiment, and I really, really want to make the kind of movies that I wish I'd seen growing up. So I put it on my LinkedIn and I put it on my Instagram bio and on my Facebook that I was interested in diversifying the film industry on screen and behind the lens. And the Iris Prize reached out because of that and said, hey, we're really interested in your work as a young LGBTQ plus identifying filmmaker in Wales. And it just kind of went from there. If I hadn't put that in my bio on LinkedIn, and if I hadn't been so authentic about the kind of stories that I want to make, maybe that wouldn't have happened, you know? And some people will think, like, don't pigeonhole yourself, but I don't see it as pigeonholing. I see it as being honest, you know?
Being honest and specificity that you're proud of.
Mhm.
What do you think are some of the biggest challenges right now within the industry that you want to address, tackle head on?
Concerns over what is profitable in terms of like diversity on screen is a problem. Like you have stuff like Sinners that is an original idea, right? And is a fantastic movie with a diverse cast. But if an emerging filmmaker pitched that, maybe the studio wouldn't have picked that up, right? So I think the biggest issue in terms of like making things and getting work out there is this idea that there isn't an audience for LGBTQ plus stories. And
Mm.
there are anyway, but then there's also the fact that LGBTQ plus stories don't have to be just for the community. Like The Haunting of Bly Manor, for example, I don't think it ever marketed itself as a queer love story. And I just watched it anyway because I loved Mike Flanagan's work. And then I was like sobbing by the last episode. And it was one of the most touching things I've ever seen. And the thing about that is my friends were watching it too. My colleagues, everyone was watching that show. But with the studios, kind of some of the studios clamping down on DEI behind the screen, on screen, that's the biggest hurdle is trying to convince people that there is an audience out there, there is a market for these stories.
Now, talk about what is your approach with something like that, because I know we've had conversations where it's like you kind of have to hide the medicine and the sugar, so to speak, right? Where I love telling stories about my culture, but sometimes you put five black characters on screen, now all of a sudden it's a woke movie. You know, talk about what is your process in terms of still getting your mission statement across while making a film generally universal. How do you approach that?
So I've kind of realized that there are going to be some studios and some production companies that are just not going to be a good fit. And that sucks, especially if you really want to work with them. But I think knowing who you're working with as well is super important because there will be someone out there, even if that means you have to wait another year. If you stand by your story in that way, you will attract people who want to work with you, right? I also think explaining to producers and other people how this story is relevant to mainstream audiences is also really, really good because, like, my last short film that I made, in my artist statement for funding and for like film festivals, I was basically saying the majority of people have experienced a situation where they go somewhere, right? And they bump into their ex and they're not quite over them and the ex has a new partner and that's really, really awkward and it's a horrible feeling. It just so happened that this movie, it was about two lesbians. But people can relate to that in the same way that queer people have had to relate their community experiences and their stories to like heterosexual media for decades. So I think framing it as being just a story is very helpful, as well as like specifying the diversity. And then my other piece of advice and like my thoughts on that really are just make it. Even if you have to do a low budget iPhone type thing, you want to do a proof of concept, you've got to make it to prove your point.
But not necessarily even a question. Isn't it just kind of sad that, like, let's just say for so, you and I teamed up and we were making a film about like with queer characters or black characters or like racism or whatever, right? It would be easier for us to sell a movie about inanimate objects or animals of different colors than it would be to actually label those characters, like you said, of a lesbian couple or just like black friends. And would you say that's true, that it would be easier to sell that version of the
100%.
film?
100%. And it's awful, but that's so true.
Pink fluffy animals. That's
Yeah,
what we're labeling them as. And we could sell that tomorrow. But let them be lesbian. Oh my God, we got a problem.
one step too far.
Too far. Too far. Well, let's skip to a positive note. I mean, something that's fun and beautiful and romantic. What was it like working with your wife on Just Friends? Were you guys married at the time? What's up?
Ooh.
We're about to get married.
Ooh,
So this is like the most stressful thing that you could possibly do. Everyone says is like making a movie, moving house, and getting married. And for some insane reason, we were in the process of doing all three at the same time.
What?
wild.
That was crazy. And we wrapped on that end of March. And then I went to edit for a week. And then we literally flew out to LA to get married. But it was just great because, sometimes when you're working with people, unless you've known them for a very long time, there's still that like professional dialogue. I'm not saying us working together wasn't professional, but it was dynamic in the way of I know what she's thinking, she knows what I'm thinking. And we have been a good team on almost all of my movies now. And I always say I write the world, she brings them to life on screen through art and production design. And it was actually
What role is it? It's production design and what else?
production design and like art department. On Just Friends, she was also the producer and the co-writer for that one.
Okay, amazing.
The original idea was from her, just based off of the fact that we hadn't worked on an explicitly lesbian story at any point in both of our careers, and we wanted to do it. And there was funding available, and she applied, and I attached myself as director. And we just built this story up just based off of the fact that we just wanted a mainstream, like young adult lesbian film because we never worked on any of those. We didn't see any of those growing up. And then it was just extra meaningful to work on it with her.
That's
Mm.
so beautiful. Congratulations. What is the type of film environment slash what crew members are you looking to employ?
So I want to work with people who don't often see their stories told on screen or find it hard to get into the industry and to build the industry that we both want together and just to show that it is possible to have crew members who work on set in wheelchairs. It is possible to have like a fleet of working class people. And especially if I'm working on a queer project, I would love to work with people from the community as well, just because it adds another layer of authenticity because people relate to the story. They understand. Like, I feel like a queer identifying costume designer may get it a bit more than someone who isn't. Not saying that the person who isn't good at their job, but there's nuance that I think sometimes you only get from having that lived experience.
What is like your ultimate career goal, right? We know why you do what you do. We know the type of movies that you're making. What is the ultimate goal for you when you see big picture, Rebs is in control, this is the way the show's going down? What is going to be your lasting footprint, your lasting imprint on this world?
First of all, proving that you can have a career in film and a normal life and just championing the 9 to 5 shooting day, which I think is completely possible. People just don't want to upset the norms. That's something I would desperately like to like prove. And I would just like to make it so that if one person watches my movies and feels at peace because they've been seen, then
Mhm.
that is the legacy that I want.
I love that.
That's solid. That's how you listen. That is bulletproof. And I think you're doing it. I think you're doing it. With you now working on your MFA at UCLA, right? You're at the you have a BAFTA Fulbright scholarship, correct? Why UCLA? Yeah, out of all the places you could have went. You and your wife came to LA, you got married, you're from the UK. Now it's UCLA. To walk us through it.
The head of the screenwriting program at UCLA is Phyllis Nage, who is the screenwriter of Carol. And
Mm.
I want,
Oh,
yeah, so I
full
Now
want,
circle.
it boom.
That's a full circle,
Ah,
right?
yeah.
I just wanted to go and learn from her for a very long time. Like before I actually started, it changed somewhat from being a aspirational thing. Maybe one day I'll go to a I seriously want to do this because I know how few stories are being made because I'm on set and I'm not making them. And UCLA is a fantastic screenwriting program that allows you and encourages you to do other classes. So I've taken like cinematography classes, producing classes that supplement the screenwriting.
Absolutely. Have you and Phyllis got a chance to hang out? Got a chance to relate?
I've taken like the intro class with her, and I'm currently taking an adaptation true story class with Phyllis. And she is an incredible professor and blows my mind every time. Every time I go to one of her lectures and her classes, I leave thinking of something that I never would have even thought about in a million years.
Rebs, let's switch it up for a second, right? Okay. I have a fun question. See, what is a travel story where you were a little unhinged? You had a little too much fun.
Oh God. There's too many to think of. I think when I went to Sweden, I was alone. I decided to take a gap year before college and went traveling around Europe. And I went to a tiny town called Abisko in Sweden. There's like 20 people that live here. And I was staying in this like hostel, and it was like 20 feet of snow. I'd never seen snow like that before, just before Christmas. And I just turned 19 and I was just going around alone. And I walked into this hostel to find that there was a guy from my hometown in the UK, and there was another lady from LA, and then there were two people who were going to my undergrad, Cardiff, 3,000, 2,000 miles away from home in this place. And we had a great time, and we were like trying out the Swedish spas, and it's like you have to roll around in the snow after. Or that's what they told us to do. So maybe it's
Ah.
just us being tourists, I don't know. And then we all had a nice glass of wine, and it was just fun talking to so many people at the same time. Probably one of the first times I'd ever actually done that through like five different language barriers and cultural barriers
Oh, wow.
until like 5 a.m.
Fun.
That totally makes sense. I would have to say this is the reason why your stories are rich. You were such a rich individual, and we can't wait to see more of what you have coming. But your work is important. Your work is super impactful, and we're so happy to have you on the show. How can people get in touch with you?
Oh, find me on Instagram at Rebs Film, which is also conveniently my email address, rebsinfilm@outlook.com.
All right.
There you go.
Y'all got the digits. Y'all got the information. Let's make magic out here. Rebs, thank you so much for being on the show, joining in the Inspo Lounge. Frequent Flyers, this is another episode of Boarding Pass. What is it, Jayden?
Inspiration needs no visa, so please join us. Be inspired.
There it is. All right. Peace, y'all.
Thank you.
Boarding Pass is brought to you by IYMS Films, available wherever you listen to podcasts. If you enjoyed today's chat, please share, subscribe, like, and review. We definitely want to hear your feedback, and we always appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you next time.